That's ultimately I'm to blame.
Yeah. Okay. So, sorry, the mic was still muted. Sorry, but I did the sound again. I'm so sorry. Welcome to the stream. You want to introduce yourself again, real quick?
Did people see our mouths move before?
Yeah, they saw it. You see, I'm saying no sound. I forgot.
Oh,
to
wonderful! Yeah. Well, we said awesome golden nugget things that can never be repeated. I'm sorry.
So we work on the same team together. Mads is in charge of C#, currently the lead program designer for that. That's awesome. So a lot of new things have been happening with C# over the last year.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it feels like almost warp speed compared to the time it takes for old programming languages like Fortran to advance. I remember Fortran, it took decades to go from one version to the next, but you've done a lot of big changes just in the last year.
Well, yeah, I think we mostly did small changes over last year, but we kind of changed our model a little bit just to see how that would be, and to also address some scenarios that were sort of driven by framework and runtime changes that we wanted to embrace in the language, even shortly after we had a major release of C#.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a little over a year ago, we shipped C# 7.0.
Yep.
7.0.
Oh, yeah.
And since then, we've had 3-point releases: C# 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3.
And you can do that now because of the cadence of Visual Studio releases and .NET Core SDK releases, right? That enables you to say, okay, if you want this, it's over there now.
Yep.
That's really cool.
So whenever we have smaller improvements that don't sort of warrant a big turn on the crank with the language, we can trickle them out if we choose, and we've done so.
Cool. That is so cool. Let's see, we've got some friends in the chat room today, and thank you everybody for joining us. We appreciate everybody tuning in. You know, we're live at Build. There's a lot of things going on. The keynote is starting over here in a few minutes. Hugo asks, how far ahead in C# versions are planned? Still 8? Eyes on 8X, 9?
So we actually only sort of roughly plan specific releases now. We're more on a sort of feature train kind of mode of thinking, where we have a number of single features or stories that with a group of features that we move along, and then whenever they're ready, we ship them. So rather than, it used to be, because we shipped so rarely, it used to be that we really thought of a theme for a given release, and we didn't slip features so much because we were building up to it for years and years.
Sure. You had a version of Visual Studio you were targeting.
Yeah.
And you knew that was coming out next year.
Exactly. And so that was just everything was on a time-driven schedule, if you will.
So now you're more agile.
We are more agile in a sense. Yeah, we work on several features in parallel, and And yes, we do try to focus in on a few and say, okay, let's get this one for the next release, but only as we kind of draw close.
Cool. Okay.
It gives, on the one hand, it allows us to ship a feature whenever it's ready, get the value out and get people using it.
Oh, yeah.
And on the other, if a feature needs bake time, it can get its bake time. And there's some features that take years to get right. We're in the middle of one right now. Nullable reference types that we know we're going to show it later today in our build talk, which is live streaming, by the way.
Yes, absolutely. You can tune into that one a little bit later today.
And that's a feature that we've been noodling on for years, where first you got to figure out the broad strokes, but then there's like a sea of details you got to get just right in order for the experience to be good. And so we just take our time until it's fully baked, and then we will ship it.
And then, since you are doing a little bit more agile release like that, you can release previews.
Yes. So again, actually, the nullable reference types, we had a public preview out since November of last year.
Yep.
We're revving that today, so later today there's going to be a new version of that.
Don't tell everybody.
That incorporates. It's not secret at all. We want you all to use it and give us feedback. There's even there's an email address at Microsoft.com where you can send your feedback, and that goes directly to me and my design colleagues, and we'll say thank you very much for your feedback and incorporate. Actually, most of the changes that we did since the first preview were motivated by feedback we got on the first preview.
Very cool. And I know at MVP Summit you had a little bit of the workshop where you had people testing features like that.
Yep.
Great feedback you got there also.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. So, let's see, any other questions here before we go over to our code? So driven and delivered language features, very agile. Yeah, all right. So, I've been struggling with some of the newer C# features. And we've been working on this Stream Tools project. I know, look, I know I'm not the best programmer, right? I want to learn, I want to grow as a developer. So, right, that's why we work together with folks here on the stream. But I've been working on this Stream Tools project where I'm generating some of the widgets that you'll see on screen here in a few minutes. And we've been working through this bot. Right, I want to have a moderator bot that sits in the chat room, and it's actually in the Twitch chat room now. We can send commands over to it, like uptime, and it'll report back how long we've been up and on the stream. So this is actually coming off of a Docker container running on this machine over here. I'll take a picture of how the stream setup is here. It's a little bit crazy here in the room.
There are a lot of different devices and a lot of cables between them.
We're very it's very Rube Goldbergian.
Yeah.
So the chat took a little bit of work, and I ran into some issues with async and await, and our friend Bill Wagner helped me with my async and await challenges.
Good. Yeah.
I was really struggling with that. So I'd like to get your opinion, take a look, and see if there's some ways that we can use the new C# features a little bit better, maybe with how we're processing commands, how we're interacting with chat.
Okay.
All right. So let's go over to our code. Doug asks the obvious question, where can we see a list of the most recent features, or will that be published after build?
Well, you can always go to github/.net/C#lang and look at the milestones that are on the championed features. We have sort of a features championed if someone from the C# design team is currently favoring it, and every championed feature gets its day in court and will eventually either get dropped or evolve into a shipping feature. So both the ones that we shipped and the ones that we haven't shipped yet, you can look at the milestone and see when we're currently going to look at it.
Do you want to run over to GitHub and show it real quick?
Sure, let's do it. Yeah.
All right, so let's open Edge, because we like Edge.
Of course. Yeah.
You can go.
Yep. So github.com/.net/C#lang. Whoop. Yeah, there we go. Here, C#lang. This is where we do all our. This is where all the meeting notes are. We have design.
Let's zoom in just a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have design meetings twice a week. We have kick-ass. Can I say that? Can I say that on the air?
Say that. Sure.
Design team consisting of some of the best engineers at Microsoft.
Brilliant folks. Oh my gosh! When I sit in, when you host those language designer panel discussions, there's always some amazing nuggets that you're going to learn from that.
Right. So we meet actually twice a week when we're going full speed, 2 times 2 hours, and the meeting notes from that come out here. A lot of them are in drafts because I have difficulty getting time to clean them up. But you get to see the sausage being made, what's and all. Then we have issues, a mixture of proposals and other kinds of commentary. Mm-hmm. But if we filter on the championed features here, these are ones that someone on the design team said at some point, I think we should consider this.
Okay.
And then occasionally, so you see most of them have a milestone. This one doesn't, because even though it's championed, we haven't had a triage since then. Sometimes the design meeting will triage the features and say, nah, forget about it, or let's give this some time in this time frame. And okay. By time frame, I mean sort of milestone. It's kind of a virtualized time frame.
It's on the parking lot. We'll think about it for sometime around here.
Right. So you can see there's a 7.3 feature here. That means it actually shipped yesterday. And you can see the ones that haven't shipped yet, those have the word candidate in them. So 8.0 candidate, 8x candidate. That sort of means we're looking at this for the next major release. This means this can go into a minor release, and we probably want it in the next wave. We also have, if you look at the different milestones, we also have x.x and x.0, which are sort of like, should be major release, but we're probably not going to look at it right now, but we think it's worth keeping around. And this one, same for minor releases, right? So that's how you can see where we're sort of targeting. We haven't put 9 milestones in there yet to the question from before.
Sure.
But that's probably going to happen soon as we start approaching the 8.0 time frame. We're going to want a more detailed bucket than X to put things.
Sure. Right. 7.3 will roll out. Right, 8.0 will happen,
right.
And then you're going to start saying, all right, the next one's after that, and plan for there.
Right, and so if you filter to the, I just changed the milestone or something? That wasn't my intention. Oh.
No, I don't think you did. I think you just, you changed the filter.
Oh, I did filter. Okay, good. Yeah. I thought, okay. Yeah, so now you can see all the 7.3 features, big and small. You can see that's actually quite a lot. But most of them are many of them are bug fix level, but some of them are quite cool. Like, how many people have asked us to allow system.enum as a constraint? They're just removing a restriction, and all of a sudden you can...
A constraint on a generic type.
On a generic, yeah.
Okay.
We have an improved overload candidates where finally we will actually, when you're looking at multiple overloads, we'll actually throw out all the candidates that wouldn't be able, that wouldn't work in the end. We used to have like a final validation phase where after we pick the overload resolution candidate, we would look, does it actually apply? And we would say, the one you picked doesn't apply, and give you an error. And we made all these little improvements that essentially they will just mostly result in you not getting errors where you used to get them, and you might not even notice, except there's this annoyance that's no longer there. But some of them are bigger.
It'll make your coding experience better. It'll be easier, right? You won't make as many errors because we'll constrain it.
Yeah. So a lot of those features aren't ones that we kind of put on the billboard, right? They're just like, well, we removed some more annoyance from your life.
Made your life easier. You're welcome. Yes.
So yeah,
very cool. All right. So you do design meetings. You said there was a link back there. Folks can see kind of the output of the design meetings.
Yeah. So in this repo, the code is text. So we keep the meetings in here a year. Here's 2018. So that's what we're working on right now. We have them all the way back to 2013, which is actually before we went on GitHub.
Okay.
Because we started out in Codeflex, and we had community help porting over the design notes from there to actually also be here. So for as long as we've had public meeting notes, they're in here. You can go back. This is useful for us as well. We go back whenever we're like, why did we do it like this? This seems stupid. We're like, well, there was probably a good reason. Let's go back into the notes and look. And usually there's a good reason.
6 years of notes is a lot of notes.
Yeah.
There's C# history there that, oh my gosh.
The dirty secret is, internally, we actually have them back to 2003.
Really?
One day I would like to publish them all, but it's a lot of work to go through and scrub. Who knows how many digs are in there at people who we report to today. So we have to be careful. But I would like to publish it all.
Doug says he's still getting used to Microsoft using GitHub. Such a great change. I love using GitHub as a Microsoft employee.
Yes, me too.
There's definitely something to being transparent with our customers, with our developers using our products, and getting feedback before we turn the crank and say, okay, here's the RTM.
Right.
It's
a little. I mean, it takes a little getting used to because we used to be very insulated when we were working on things.
Yeah.
The whole process, just for developers working on the product, for me as a designer, of having all the sort of work in progress visible, like being in the dumpling restaurant where they have glass windows to the kitchen and they're making the dumplings there. It is a little scary, right? And you do get people saying, "Are you guys crazy? What are you thinking?" And
sure.
And you kind of have to grow some thick skin.
You do.
But on the other hand, that's the kind of feedback we want when we're thinking about the feature, not when we shipped it already.
The people that are giving you that criticism, they have a vested interest.
They do.
They want to see our products do better, and if they see something that doesn't make sense, if we are overthinking something or not thinking it through far enough, to get that feedback is tremendously valuable.
It is. So in some, oftentimes, of course, there's sometimes, there's going to be this knee-jerk reaction, and we know because we had it at first when we started looking at something. And sometimes you need to, sometimes that's a good sign, that's a smell, but sometimes it's also, wow, we're doing something that's new and feels unfamiliar, and we need to think about not the first impressions only, but how is this going to work in the long run? If we always go by, first impression is going to be bad, we're not going to do this feature, then we can't really take the big leaps.
Sure.
So there's always a balance there.
And when I come to an event like Build, I get that first impression when I sit in your session, I sit in a Scott Hanselman session, and I see the latest C# or .NET feature. It's like, okay, Monday morning, I've got to go try that, and show my buddies at work. Mm-hmm. And then after we test it out, it's like, okay, what did we learn? And what's the next question that I've got to ask?
Yeah.
And go after at that point.
Yeah.
And being able to do that inside the scope of an issue list on GitHub, tremendously valuable. Not just to us as the people building the product, but for folks who need help with those answers.
Yes. And also, coming back to the release cadence, one thing we also, so there's the courage to kind of work in the open, but also actually now we're a little more courageous when it comes to shipping a feature soon, because we don't need to be quite as certain that it's complete. We have to be certain that what we put in there is good, because we can never do a breaking change. We're not doing breaking changes in the language. But sometimes there are bits and pieces that we haven't quite thought through yet, or hadn't thought of, that we're more confident now saying, well, that's all right, we can figure that out later. And then the last bits of the feature will actually come in some of the point releases. We've seen that with tuples, for instance, where we added extra bits and pieces to the tuple story, both in 7.1 and in 7.3.
Okay. Yep.
That kind of.
As somebody who used the old tuple model, and what do you call the old ones that were actually in the BCL?
System.tuple.
Yeah. Right. It felt weird having that generic type and having all these different values laying out there. It was like, what am I going to, and I'm going to create a function that receives these, and that func, it was like, oh my gosh. But now the flexibility of it, I'm like a kid in a candy store. I'm like, all right, I'm going to use this everywhere. And then when I end up with 2 or 3 or 4 parameters to that value tuple, it's like, okay, now I want to refactor this and make it into a class.
Yeah.
Now I want to make a struct or a class, and I want to make it real.
Yeah, certainly I think I don't know if you have places in there where that in your code that we could go to in a minute that may we could have a look. But I think definitely if you have a lot of things in a tuple, you may want to wonder, is there a concept in there that I'm not expressing?
Yeah.
Because the thing about tuples is, and I think why the system.tuple felt so weird, is that whenever you have a type, especially a generic type, you think it sort of represents a concept. There's a domain idea in there, right? designed the class to have a certain meaning. And the thing about tuples is that they really don't have a meaning, right? A tuple is not. You shouldn't think of a tuple as a thing. Oh, here comes a tuple. There's a tuple.
Everywhere's a tuple.
Everywhere's a tuple. You don't have tuples in the domain you're programming with, right?
Yeah.
It's really a utility concept that when it's embedded in the language, that makes much more sense, right? So we really encourage people to not think of tuples as values in and of themselves, even though they are, and you can use them as such. We put things in like deconstruction and so on, so you never actually have to. You never have to juggle the tuple. You never have to put it in a variable and do things with it. You can create it right when you return it out of a method. You can deconstruct it right when you receive it, and the tuple itself fades into the background. It's not really a thing.
Okay.
And that's sort of that's part of the design, right? Just like a parameter list to a method, the parameter list isn't a thing.
No.
Right. It's just there's some parameters.
Right.
Yes, syntactically there's a thing that's called a parameter list that starts with a parenthesis and ends with a parenthesis. Oh, I should do this in the opposite order, Renee. It's not a thing. You can't in C# grab the parameter list and run around with it, and you wouldn't want to. And
right.
tuples kind of are sort of the symmetric concept to that.
And I found in my experimenting with tuples, it helps solve that problem where I might have a parameter list going into a method, and I end up adding that 5th, 6th, 7th argument, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm now in like scope creep of arguments. Mm-hmm. And be able to, and then I turn it into a tuple that I'm eventually going to turn into a class. So I end up with one signature, and I just extend that class.
I see.
When I want to effectively add another argument, almost like how we do event args.
Right.
I extend the event args because I want to pass more information into an event. So.
Yeah, that's definitely one way you can use them. Although that intermediate state where you're taking a single tuple in, that's smelly. It
does.
It sort of feels like the point from which you want to go either one way or the other. But I guess it's useful when you're in that transition phase where you want to make it first class, but you haven't decided.
I just want to get code written fast.
Yeah.
You know?
That makes sense.
So let's take a look at the chat room real quick. Let's see. Hugo says, great job to you, Mads, and the whole languages team on this and previous releases. C# is fun to use. All right.
He's making fun with the word fun because of our. He put it in capital letters because we're actually learning a lot from functional programming languages. So I think that's.
Is he referencing functional programming? What do you think? Is that what you're doing there, Hugo? A whole lot of former Microsoft not invented here are gone. Yes, I think there's a lot of that happening where we're embracing and learning from other folks and saying, let's do a little bit of that. And we're sharing with folks and they're learning from us in other programming languages. Seeing async await happen in JavaScript. Mm-hmm. It's like, I've seen that before. You know? It's clear that it's a good thing, right? We're all leveling up together. Nope. No pun, functional, just really fun.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, I was reading too much into it. Sorry about that.
Cool.
People poke fun at us over the functional thing, so...
I think there's something to be said for, the functional capabilities in C# delivering, different ways if you want to continue using the language.
Yeah. Try to do it in a way that it's broadening your palette of options and giving you a more concise way of expressing exactly what you want. One danger when you start in the object-oriented corner and you try to reach over to the functional corner is you smoosh them together too hastily, and what you have is two languages in one, where you have to sort of decide which track you're on, so to speak, right? Which corner of the language do I want to inhabit? And we don't want that to happen. So we're sort of trying to take in functional concepts gracefully and fit them in with the overarching object-oriented imperative paradigm that is in C#, rather than having a dialect inside of the language. If you want to be purely functional, go and use F#. It's great for that. F# is a better functional language than C# will ever be. Right? Yeah. But some of the concepts that are in functional programming are useful to everyone, regardless of whether their overall style is functional. And so we pretty liberally let ourselves inspire from that camp of languages in particular, and also from other imperative languages that are also borrowing from functional programming.
Cool. Okay. So why don't we go over to the code?
Yeah.
And we were talking about looking for some tuples. How can we search for and find tuples quickly and easily in the code?
Do you have any out parameters?
I don't know.
That would be one thing.
Let's do a quick find on the solution.
We can look for out parameters, and we can look for system.tuple.
Holy crow. Well, I'm down in...
Oh, output.
well, no, we don't want to find output or timeout.
Can you search for...
What would be a better way to qualify? So now we're down into Bootstrap. I don't want to look at JavaScript.
No. This is terrible.
I have some output arguments from... Well, this is a...
They aren't out parameters still, are they? Or
no, it's what it's receiving in this extension method. Let's see.
So
this is interesting. So one of our viewers, John from Denmark, helped write some task helper methods here so that we could say run this task or time out after a certain amount of time. So he built these extension methods to extend it a little bit so that, you know what, let's throw a timeout exception.
He built it on when any. That's beautiful, yeah.
So I thought this was really nice because he's also got a default value here so that if you don't tell me timeout after 5 seconds, it just does. So that was kind of cool. I was really thrilled to see this piece of code that he shared with us.
Right.
So, but going back to that find results.
Another thing is to look for, unless you already know, you talked about system.tuple and how it felt annoying. Are you using it anywhere?
I don't think so. Not in this.
Developers.
It's a list of strings.
Oh, it's coming out of jQuery.
Okay.
Spell tuple, right?
Yeah.
Nope.
Right. And the final thing is, if you have, you mentioned that you creating a class for gathering up output sometimes. If you have some of those where you really, they're really only for this one place, they're also candidates for using tuples instead. You have chat message event args here, but you're probably using that one. Yeah, you're using that one in several places.
Yeah, so...
Oh, that's fluent.
It's a little bit fluent. So I have inside of our bot. So the bot has a collection of commands, and when it receives a message, right? So here I've got I should be using the mouse. Right. So when we receive a chat message here, right? So I'm going to await a call into this chat message down here, and then this is where I start to inspect and say, okay, do we know how to parse this? And I'm going to try to get... I'm going to try and get the Azure service. No. That is the key for... I'm forgetting what that's the key for. It's the key for getting my connection to Azure, I think? Because I go and I bounce off of Azure if someone asks a question. So if somebody asks, if there's a message posted that ends with a question mark, I bounce off of Azure Cognitive Services, and then we send a message over chat back to those folks.
Okay.
So I'm looking in here and thinking there's a lot of logic that's going on where I first do this test to say, well, if it ends with a question mark, go do this. If it's,
look what you have there, by the way. You have an out parameter.
Yeah, right. And this is looking at my list of current users.
Yeah.
And then I go and... Oh, I remember what this is.
Okay.
I did a timeout. I don't want somebody saying, you know what, let me ask a bunch of questions back to back real quick, and then overload all my questions that are being handled by Azure Cognitive Services. We want to wait and make sure that it spits out that information back to the chat room appropriately.
Okay.
So what I do is I actually check to see, has somebody already asked that question recently?
Yeah.
If they're asking if they are asking too fast, exit now.
Okay.
Otherwise, let's go bounce off of Azure, and then we'll send that message back using this handle Azure. So, and you can see some of the folks here in the chat room, they're actually asking questions, and then the bot is responding. What language is Jeff speaking? Jeff speaking English with Mid-Atlantic.
Okay, so as long as it has a question mark in it, the bot will go in and respond?
It sees that it ends with the question mark on 134, and then it says, oh, let's go ask a question. Right, and we've trained cognitive services using the Q&A maker that's available on Azure.
Awesome.
And it has a handful of questions it knows. Now, see, look at this. What is the meaning of life? So Mr. Regs here is trying to see if the cognitive services is going to respond, and it's actually going to time out. And it should come back and say, I don't know the answer to that. Right. What does the cow think asks, how many hats? And I've actually programmed a canned response, and you can see.
I'm not certain.
There's no one knows the real answer because his wife keeps discarding a different one. Yes. So yeah, now folks are asking funny questions. All right, I see what you're doing out there, chat room.
42 had to come up. But it's the answer, right? It's not the meaning.
It's the answer. It's not the right.
Yeah.
So I'm doing things there, and this section of ifs here, right, where I'm going through and I'm doing the different tests to figure out how am I going to process this message, right? And I know you've shown us a little bit about pattern matching in some of your demos. Is this a candidate for pattern matching where I'm inspecting on the message and deciding to do something with that?
Well, that depends, but it looks like what you're doing with the message is you're actually inspecting the string itself. So we don't currently, so
that's, you might as well do a switch statement at that point, with just a standard switch.
Well, certainly if you're just checking whether the whether it's a particular constant, then an old-fashioned switch would already be just matching against constant. You're doing more things here, but you're doing them programmatically. Pattern matching isn't so good at that yet.
Okay.
So, in general, if pattern matching was strong enough, this could be a pattern matching question. Pattern matching is definitely pattern matching with a switch. Is something you'll do when you're inspecting one given value. So you have that here, right? You have the message, and you're inspecting it in various ways, and depending on which one holds, you'll do something. So
right.
But because the ways you're inspecting it can't currently be represented as patterns, you wouldn't be using a switch for it. You do the if-else-if pattern that you're sort of doing here.
Okay.
You're essentially using it's sort of like a bouncer pattern. You recognize a case, and it's not really the bouncer pattern. You recognize a case, and if that's the case, you handle it and you return out.
Now you said bouncer pattern. For some of the beginners, some of the folks that aren't familiar with that term, can we?
Yeah. So there's let's see. So let's see. Boom, 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 boom. Well, this is an example of the bouncer pattern, I guess. The idea is that you check something in order to you look for the condition you don't want to deal with. You look for the wrong input or the wrong situation, and then you get out quickly.
Fail fast.
Yes, it's a pattern that instead of saying if this is right and this is right and this is right and this is right, and now you're 5 indentations level in, then your business logic is sort of deeply nested. Yeah. The bouncer pattern says let's get out of the method completely by rejecting this input and this input and this input, and then the business logic comes last, but at least it's at the top level of indentation, so to speak.
Okay.
So it's sort of a style to go through, and patterns are good for that. If you have you're doing something here where you're using try-get value. Try methods are sort of like they're sort of like a poor man's pattern in a way, right? Because they do what patterns do in that they apply a test.
Okay.
Like, and they return true or false, like an is expression with a pattern in it would do.
Yeah.
But then they also, if it's true, then you get some information out related to when it's true. So if you if on it, then you have that available inside of your if here. And this is a place where you've actually already started using C# 7.0 features. You have the out bar here, where when you have an out parameter, you can declare a fresh variable for it right in place.
And having to declare that ahead of time, and then, all right, maybe it'll get loaded, maybe it won't.
Right.
It felt like it was. I felt guilty about allocating memory for a variable that I don't know if I'm going to use this or not.
Right. It's not so much the memory though, because I bet we're allocating it anyway when it sits in there.
Okay.
It's mostly that you are declaring it in a place where you don't care about, so to speak. Right.
It's like programming litter.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
I feel like a litter bug.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So that's a nice use of the outvar there, so that you sort of in a localized way. Yeah, you can do this.
Receiving and handling that. Okay. And then I've got these other if statements.
Let's see, Azure user. So you're getting you're declaring as an out variable here. Do you ever use it again?
So what I do,
the Azure user word?
So I follow up with this commands too fast.
Oh, you use it right down here, yeah.
Yeah. So if we look at this method, this is just a method that says, well, make sure that the last time they send a command is less. Right, It is greater than our cooldown time, so it's expired, and...
Right. And you have this method out here. Do you call it from anywhere else? Is that specific to what you do up there?
Well, it says 2 references here inside of CodeLens. Let's take a look. It actually, it looks like I make the same call from the same method here. So there's commands too fast there, and it's actually here in this in the same method twice.
So... maybe commands too fast should be a local function then. Because,
okay, so a local function.
Yeah.
That's a function inside of a function?
Like a method that you declare inside of another method, yeah.
Okay.
Or inside of any body of code, really.
Okay.
Because what you see is you have it as a helper method, but it's really just for this method, and you even call it twice. So one of the things that you can do if you make it if you make it a local function, one advantage you get is you don't accidentally publish it to other things in the same scope that you don't actually want to. You haven't tested for, you weren't intending for it to be used by anyone else. But the other thing is that it then has visibility of the things that are in scope in this method. So for instance, they both take E, which I think is probably one of your parameters. Yeah, there it goes. So you could actually just, if you wrote it in here, you could remove E as a parameter and just
and the Azure user.
Right? Maybe but you're not passing the Azure user both times. You're having a different user down here. This is weird though. You have used that. What?
So I'm receiving a different user up here.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wow.
So active users, I should receive the same in both places.
Yeah, it's a little weird that you get. Since you have the Azure user in scope, this is one of the big discussions, by the way, about out variables. Should this be in scope outside of the if statement or not? Well, it's really convenient that it is in this case here. So you just delivered an argument for it. But that means it remains... Oh, it's inside of this bigger if. So Azure user goes out of scope here.
On 146. Okay.
So you do all this...
So he's gone at that point.
Yeah, you do all this work to retrieve the user and check if he's going too fast and so on here, but you do it again down here
for a different
case for another command. So well, that's actually probably an argument for. So first of all, commands too fast could become a local function, but you might want to have a bigger local function that does all that stuff that you're repeating here.
Yeah.
And for instance, puts those helper methods way at the end of the method. That would be
okay.
a way of dealing
Okay.
with it.
But I may be able to call it just once. Oh no, so I'm doing commands too fast, and I'm actually saying what was the command that was called. In this case, it's this Azure Q&A here on line 143 versus down lower, I'm actually passing in the first segment of what they requested.
Yes, so you would still, you might be able to, you can certainly elide the E parameter. You might be able to elide the user parameter depending on how you're doing things, but this one, you want that still as a parameter to your local function.
Okay.
It's a different command.
So let's take the user, and maybe we can fetch that outside of right, where is it I'm getting the user? Here it is. Active users try get value, and then it's, right, and it's the service name, so once upon a time I was connecting to several different chat services at once. So it's the service name and the username, and I probably do the exact same thing here. I do it again. So I've actually got code duplicated in both places.
Looks like you do. Yeah, there's probably some factoring out you can do.
Yeah.
The thing I wonder is, what do you... So, if you want to do that, what's the stuff that isn't the same? There's the stuff coming in of the... let's see.
Well, let's dedupe these two user keys. Let's just have one user key and promote it up to the top. So why don't we move this one up above our first if statement?
Right, if you can, it's the first if statement.
Right, this is the one that's saying.
Yeah. Yep,
right?
got it.
Let's even move this up higher, and then we can go to the end here.
And you're sure that E is not null, right?
I am. Oh, don't do this to me. It shouldn't be null.
What if it is null? What do you want to do?
That's a good question.
Do you want?
Well, this is a private method, right? So it's only coming in here.
Okay, so let's assume that.
So I'm
a private
guarded,
method.
effectively.
Okay, so let's not do anything about this until we get the null reference, the nullable reference types into C# in C# 8, and then you turn that on and you see if somebody might actually be calling you with null, and in that case you either want to take this parameter type and put a question mark on it to say, hey, yeah, I deal with null, so thank you for sending me a null.
Okay.
Or you keep it like this, and then that other method gets told, you know what, you shouldn't be passing it a null, and you get to fix that bug there.
Okay, so the compiler will throw an error over there.
It will give you a warning.
Yeah, okay.
So, okay, let's not deal with that now. Let's assume that it's not null. So this is, what you're doing here is fine.
So I've moved the user key up. So let's get rid of this second user key that does the exact same thing.
Yeah.
We don't need that, and we can change this just into user key.
Yeah. And you sure you want to obtain the user key always? Like or the user always?
Well, it's right, we're just formatting the information. You're right. We do want to get the user so that we know who it is each time.
We probably do want to get it each time. Yeah.
So I could probably move 140 and 141 up here, right?
Yep.
So let's just scoot that up. Okay.
So since we now want the user to be around all the time, you could do it like this. But now Azure user is going to be in scope for the rest of it. But you might consider it bad form now to have it be an outvar here, because you actually want to have the Azure user be around for the remainder of the method. And so maybe just as a matter of style, you want to declare it as a variable up here, right? You want to actually say var Azure user up here. Maybe you do. Now the problem is that you don't have anything to initialize it with, so now you have to give it its actual type.
Right, which is this chat user info.
Chat user info. But that might be a better. You might be doing a better service to your future maintainers if you're more explicit about it.
Okay.
And now we can just we can delete it here. And maybe you just want to probably want to call it user instead of Azure user.
At this point, yeah.
And you have
you have to do the function key with that.
Do you have wire to? Yeah, there you do. Just call it user.
Okay. So I was clearly overthinking returning a var there when I could just keep reusing the user here.
I think that it was fine. It's just that when you started using it for the whole rest of the method, maybe this is just better style to actually declare it. But you do. I mean, now I do have to pay the price that I have to give it the explicit type, and I couldn't use var. So I'm not saying it was the wrong thing to do. I'm just saying in this case, I would probably err on the side of making the declaration more visible, more top level.
Mr. Regs, his OCD is triggering him. We've got 134 here. We're extra tabbed in there. Let's fix that. There you go. Thank you, Mr. Regs.
To be honest, that was bugging me as well. Thank you.
All right. So now we don't we don't need that extra place where I was fetching the user down here. We can eliminate lines 161 and 162 because we've already done it up at the top.
Yes, so now we have a user here that's either looked up in the dictionary or created a new using this if statement here.
Okay.
So very nice. And now you can just, in the places where, yeah, this is good. Now we could also, do you want to bring in the commands too fast in order to show a local function?
Sure, let's do that. So
what I recommend is that you go to definition on it. Oh, sorry, function key. So there it is. I recommend that we just take it and is it the method right above? Let's see.
It's 2 methods up. Yeah.
We can just, let's exit out here. It's gone.
You cut it.
And are we inside of it now here?
Yep.
We can hover here. Yeah, that's it, right? Let's just paste it in at the end of the method here.
Okay.
And we can't use accessibility modifiers in there because they're always just available.
They're private to that method.
Yes.
Okay.
But there you go. Now I think there's one red thing. There's one thing.
Oh, is it's user here? Is it because we
yes,
the name?
We have the name user in scope now, and you can't shadow parameters and local variables in C#, which is a rule that not everybody agrees with. But there you have it. So let's just rename this one. Call it.
We can actually just yank it, right? You were saying it's in scope.
So yes, I was going to go there next.
Okay.
But so we could call it chat user or something like that, right? Now we fixed that problem. I just wanted to get to working before we.
Okay.
Always a good idea when you refactor. Get to where it compiles at least before you go to the next step.
Yeah.
So, but now yes, we actually have the user in scope. So, and we have an event args in scope. Here it's called args, and the one we have up there was called E.
Yeah.
So
very explicit name.
Right. So one trick we could do is we can rename this thing back to user, knowing that it's a bug, and we can commit to that. Whoop. And we can rename this one to E, because if we rename it, we get a rename on all the uses of it as well.
Okay.
So there you go. Now it's complaining that these 2 names are shadowed. So we're just going to go, yeah. But we don't care, because...
Well, I think we need to fix line 187.
Oh, there's one we didn't get in there. Yeah. Oh, I didn't do it right. So now we fixed the method up so that it's just using the E and the uses that were in scope.
Okay.
For the surrounding method. But of course, the calls are now messed up. So we have to go and remove the corresponding arguments as well.
Okay.
And that was one of them.
There's one more.
And up here as well. We're passing too many arguments now.
Cool.
So now.
And how it works. Now it works. We think it works. It passed the.
Now
it passed Visual Studio.
It works.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hacking TV, thank you for hosting the channel. They just started hosting us chatting here.
Oh, great.
And Brendan is saying, there's a keyboard shortcut to fix those kinds of issues in the whole file at once. Yeah, but we like using the tools that we have here. So, Q&A test. So, oh yeah, look at this. So, Mr. Regs is trying to use a command called Q&A and trigger the question mark at the end, right? So, thinking that through, when we look at the message that's received, he's passing a chat message that ends with a question mark. So he's going to get into the first one.
Yeah.
And I have this, right? I've artificially named the command Q&A because I go against my question and answer. So yeah, you're not going to hit that, Mr. Regs. I think we're protected from escaping out like
he's trying to do like a SQL injection.
Right. He's trying to execute. Sushinator, yes, this is a local function that we just put in here. So
yes.
Okay.
So one thing to note about, we put it in at the end. Local functions, unlike local variables, let's see, where is it? Down here at the end. Local functions can be used before they're declared.
Okay.
They just can't.
Just like JavaScript, it does that hoisting, where it's available for me.
Yeah. So I like to put my local functions at the end, just sort of like get the main flow first, and then the sort of expand on the details later, right? So you can actually have a pretty. Actually, I think what I've seen is people like local functions. They tend to factor out more functionality and reduce their duplication more because they don't have to sort of publish the method to the class scope. So, I'm doing this nitty gritty here. I'm doing it again. Let me factor out into a local function and shove it to the end, and then you can see give it a good descriptive name for what it logically does, like you do here, and then sort of below the fold you get the details of what those things do.
Okay. And Mr. Regs is following up saying Q&A won't accept questions. What's your plan for Q&A? Well, actually, Q&A is it's a stubbed name for my command that actually answers the questions that you ask with a question mark. So right when we ask questions like, what editor is Jeff using? And if I actually ask that with a question mark, thanks, is Jeff using question mark, then it's actually going to go ask the question and give us a response.
Right, from the bot.
From the bot. There it is.
Nice.
So that's the Q&A command at work, and when we rebuild and deploy this, now I've got simpler code that's easier to manage. But so we move this into our method, right, to do the processing, and it's simple. It's in one place. I've got all that logic for commands too fast, and I'm a big fan of that rule. I only want to have 7 lines of code in a method. You get outside of that, you're doing too much. And I'm okay with, here's another simpler thing that we put in here, and it's another 7. All right, that's fine. But at what point do you have a couple of local functions like this, and you say, you know what? Yeah, let's push these out and make them proper functions in the rest of my class.
Well, I wouldn't do it for the reason that the method gets too big. I think you were onto something where I wouldn't count the local methods towards the size of the function because it's neatly factored. I think the reason why you want to keep your method short is so that the logic doesn't get too spaghetti.
Oh yeah, I want to keep concept count to a minimum.
Exactly.
So that method is very well describing that one thing it does.
Right. So I think that these little helper methods, I think that in the world where we have local functions, they often start their life as a local function rather than being moved in. You'd rarely move something in a sort of a steady state world. We only did it because you didn't used to be able to have it there, right? So in a transition phase, you'll move some things in and say, I can make this local. But typically, they'll start their life as local, and then you figure out, they're doing something more general that I actually also need here, and that's when you promote them out to a private helper method.
Okay. Now there's a refactoring that some of our friends who are working on Visual Studio, right? That might be something cool to build, to put in there.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we have of refactorings around local functions yet, but moving things in and out and removing those unnecessary parameters when refactoring that checks that a given private method is actually only used in one place and is able to
give the little light bulb or it's a screwdriver now, I think. The icon, the fix. Oh no, that's a code fix.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I can't remember, but certainly give you. It depends on the version of the tool, but that gives you. We could do that, right? I don't think we have that refactoring right now, but we could do it, or somebody can write it because
just the little 5-10 minutes we took to do that refactoring. That's something that could be automated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's including eliminating those parameters.
Yeah.
That.
Suggesting
actually we actually always get passed the same, and the only reason they're parameters is because the method lived outside and couldn't see it.
Yeah. So, Sushinator, it's not going to answer the question about my credit card number. I'm sorry. No.
Nice try.
And he comes back and he sees the little emoji that he's using here. He's using our .NET bot. He's one of our subscribers. All the folks here with a star are subscribers. And they get the .NET bot they can use as an emote here in our chat room.
Oh, cool.
So that's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So please show us Jeff's user secrets file. No, we're not showing that either. These guys are really trying to get in here. Yes, and I have accidentally shown my user secrets file in the past. I'm sorry
Okay.
to say. Let me tell you how many times I've had to go and recycle Azure keys because I've accidentally shown Azure keys here.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, I talked about the anxiety we had about going on GitHub, but you were like sharing your actual screen.
Yeah.
In real time.
Oh
so.
my gosh, yes. And right, it's one thing to prepare for an event like Build or Ignite, and you're going to go in and here's the demos I've got.
Right.
And they're very fixed, and we're going to go through and, I'm going to show these couple projects. I've got my code all preset. And when we're doing something like this and we're talking to folks and we're answering questions and we've got existing code here and we want to work together. We want to pair a program like this. There's something different. There's a completely different feel. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you can make mistakes, and I've made them.
It's humanizing.
Oh, it is. Yeah. It is very humanizing. So very cool. All right. Well, we've been on for about an hour. Uh-huh. I know they're going to be going a little bit further here with the keynote in the other room. Is there anything else you want to take a look at here in the code? Any other features you want to talk about?
Let's see. So in your code, I think we talked about probably some of the main things from the C# 7.0. We weren't able to find good places to use tuples, but we talked about them a lot. We can talk about some of the stuff that we've been doing in the point releases since then.
Okay.
I don't know. There might be places in here, but it might get gnarly to start to use it. But one of the things I mentioned, there's sort of like there's been a cross-layer effort that we lovingly refer to as span of T.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Which is a very interesting collaboration between language, framework, and runtime to allow more kind of more fine-grained control over how you work with sequences or chunks of consecutive memory locations, if you will.
Right.
Of a type of your choosing, and span of T. So span of T can represent contiguous memory with n repetitions of a T inside of it.
Okay.
So you'd go like, isn't that what arrays are for? And
right.
And that's right. That's what arrays are for. But arrays have some problems that lead you to some very inefficient and or unsafe code. First of all, an array, you need to allocate it on the heap. So there's an allocation of a rather big object there.
Okay.
But then if you want to pass it to someone else, some array that you're really fond of, you're passing it to someone else for them to look at, you have no guarantee that they're not actually tinkering with it and changing it.
Okay.
Also, I might only want to pass them part of my array. I want to like give them like from element 10 to 19 or whatever.
Okay. Okay.
And
I'm passing a part of the message that someone sent me.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So span is a representation of memory that isn't its own memory. It's a window onto some other memory. That could be an allocated array. It could be the character array under a string.
Okay.
So it would apply. So that would be a span of character. Would apply to some of your scenarios here. Okay. It could also be memory that's not allocated as an array at all, but that lives on the stack, or that came to us from some unmanaged buffer we got through Interop or whatever. And span of T can give you a window of a certain length. Like a span, just like an array, has a length, and it has and it has an indexer into.
So a span is a collection of.
It's a window onto some other memory.
Okay.
It doesn't own its own memory.
Okay.
It's a window onto memory. And it can be a slice of an array, for instance. It can, so you can slice it, and you get a smaller window, but still onto the same memory. You can observe changes through it, like if the underlying memory changes, you can see that through the span, and you can also make your own changes through the span, unless it's a read-only span, in which case you can only observe. One way I'm going to put it in my talk later today is span is like a window, and a regular span is an open window where you can reach through and change the thing. But a read-only span is a closed window where you can only observe through the glass as things change.
You've got those flower pots just outside the window. You can open the window, reach out, water them, and whatever. But a read-only one, it's closed.
Just
you can only touch it.
Watch them grow.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So span is nice because it lets you pass only the parts of a given chunk of memory to somebody else that you want to let them see, and you can choose whether to let them also muck with it or not. And for your own algorithms, it lets you do things like substring or subarray without having to copy the data. Right? So you don't have to do
without copying into and allocating effectively more memory.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So some pretty neat things you can do where you chunk up your large string into smaller things using spans without ever copying the actual text.
So you end up effectively with a reference to that little piece that's still in memory and managed over there.
Yes. And the span itself, I should say, is a struct, so it doesn't itself need allocating, which is important for the story to work, right?
Okay.
Otherwise, you're just allocating different objects.
And our friend Jobun in the chat room here is saying SpanFT is brilliant stuff, using it everywhere now.
Oh, great.
I feel like SpanFT, and we're talking about a lot of low-level memory management.
Yeah.
It's not something that the typical 9-to-5 person who's working in MVC and they're just passing data back and forth for 95% of what they're doing, getting data from the database and painting it on the screen, they don't need SpanFT. But if they're tuning an interaction over a TCP client like we're doing here, it might make sense to do that to better handle memory.
Yeah, I think though that there's a chance that span will be useful enough that it'll spill out to broader usage.
Okay.
If nothing else, then it's a good exchange type, and it might start showing up in APIs to lower level, like at least in overloads of certain APIs to lower level stuff.
Stuff like streams?
Streams.
Okay.
I saw you were using SignalR in here.
Yep, there's some SignalR.
That's a place where we want to use spans as much as possible because we're doing heavy lifting on the lower level, and any copying, any allocation that we can save benefits all the users above.
Okay.
So for many people, it's just nice to know that it's down there, that layers below you can now become more optimal, but you might also start seeing it bleeding through.
Now Jobun's pointing out memory of T.
Yeah.
So what's memory of T?
So they're sort of the same thing, except span, in order to handle, for instance, be able to represent stack allocated memory and memory coming in from unsafe buffers and so on. Span is a new kind of struct that we added to this. This is where the language aspect comes in, where we added what we call a ref-like struct.
Okay.
And those cannot live in the heap. They cannot live in a heap allocated object. They have to live on the stack.
Right.
So a span can only live on the stack.
Okay. Okay.
And we keep track of lifetime, like a span to some memory. You can stack allocate a span. There's actually a language feature for that. You can say, span of int s equals stack alloc, and then you allocate 10 elements right there on the stack, not on the heap.
Directly.
And then you can pass it on to other things, but we make sure that the lifetime of that span does not. You can't return that span because it latched on to memory that's in this stack frame, and if you return out of it,
you've jumped.
You would be pointing into something that no longer exists.
Okay. Okay.
So there's very advanced lifetime tracking of span to make sure that the pointer to memory, you can never have a span can never be a dangling pointer to memory.
Okay.
But that also means you can't store it in another object, which is a limitation. So it lets us do really efficient things, but at the cost of it, you can't store it. Okay. Memory of T is a thing that has slightly more overhead, but it's resilient. It can be. It's a normal object, or rather, a normal struct that can be stored in a heap object.
So that kind of answers Philippe's question here. When would you use span of T over memory of T?
Yeah, if you're keeping something around in an object, you use memory of T.
Okay.
Then you can walk up to that memory of T. You can get a span from it, and you can do all the span operations. And then the next time you can get a span from it again, and, but it persists. It can persist across different sort of streams of execution, if you will.
Very cool. So async stuff or longer-lived reference to an array window.
Yeah, so that's what memory would be for. Like if you're doing an async method, because it stores things on the heap between resumptions, for each await it will, put something on the heap for later. You can't use span across an await in
Sure,
in an
sure,
async
because
method. So you'll have to use memory for that.
Okay, very cool. All right, we are almost out of time. We've got to give up the room in a few minutes here.
Okay.
So this has been very cool. We've got about 50 people watching right now. So Hugo has a final question here. Allocate a sign to memory of t, then work against a span of t from the memory?
Yeah, well, there's many things you can do directly on memory. Just use that. But you can always get a span to it, and because you might be calling a utility method that expects a span. The thing about span is you can get one from pretty much anything you have. You can get spans from strings and from arrays and from memories and from stack allocation. And so span is sort of like the currency type that you can always get to from other representations of other types representing contiguous memory.
Okay, that's very cool.
So that's sort of like if you want to write something that works over a contiguous chunk of memory, and you want to make it as useful as possible to as many people as possible, you should consider having it take a span of t. And then you're not forcing people to allocate a fresh array to give to you or whatever. In fact, one thing I think we should consider is to have a params span of t.
Oh, wow.
Where you can pass in an array if you want to, and it turns into span of t, but you can also...
So you're suggesting we could have a method, right? Public void foo and params span of... Oh, look at that.
Yeah, you probably don't have framework 2.1.
Yeah, look at that.
Span of t.
Span of some type.
Or something, int or a string or whatever.
Right, and then stuff, and then we'd be able to argue.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be a cool addition to the language in the future, because what params does today is if you pass in separate arguments rather than an array itself, it immediately heap allocates an array. And so a lot of people avoid using it for the cost of that. If it has to be high performance, but if it was a span, then we could stack allocate for the case where you pass in individual arguments. We could stack allocate the array to keep them in, and we never would have a heap allocation.
Now, is there any danger with using too much, right? With overflowing memory, overflowing a buffer, by right? How do you control the deallocation of the span?
Well, that's the neat thing. The span itself, which is just a little struct, just throw it away. Nobody has to deallocate anything because the memory it points to it's not its own. It's somebody else's memory.
Okay.
And so it's their problem how to deallocate it.
Okay. So when we lose all the references to it, the garbage collector will dispose of it.
Well, if it's an array, then the span counts as a reference to the array.
Okay.
And when the span goes away, then the array has one less reference to it. So the garbage collector can pick up the array, but the span itself, since it doesn't own the memory, it just borrows it, and it has the lifetime rules to make sure that it doesn't overstay its welcome. It doesn't borrow things for longer than those things will certainly be alive.
There you go. Okay, I got it.
It doesn't really. That's sort of the trick. It's sort of like the memory management of it, in a sense, is done by that compile time analysis that makes sure that it doesn't live for too long.
Okay.
So nothing has to happen at runtime.
Okay, that makes sense to me now. So let's go to Cheer Up for the final question here regarding C# 8 default interface implementation. I know this is something that you're going to be talking about in your session later today. C# only allows to inherit one class to avoid diamond problem, and instead it allows to inherit multiple interfaces. Wouldn't default interface implementations bring back the diamond problem?
Yes, they bring back the diamond problem. Sorry. the thing we realized is the diamond problem isn't as bad. But so to quickly iterate that where the diamond problem is. Let's say that I have an interface that introduces a new method.
Okay.
Okay, that's what they do. And just an old-fashioned interface. Now I have two interfaces that inherit from that one, that derive from that one.
Okay.
So let's call the top one A, and then
here let's
the next one B and C.
I have an interface here we could talk about. I have this command interface.
Yes.
So I have execute is a method here, and I've got these properties.
Yep.
So if I had another command,
so you make a special command.
Azure command.
Yes. And that inherits from I command, and one of the things it does is to provide a default implementation for the execute method.
So
with some syntax, it would essentially override it. Yeah.
Right.
Oops. Task execute with the same parameters, and then
that, and then string. Full command
text, and then a method body to provide a default implementation, which is the new feature.
So something like that.
Yeah, and then let's say that you have another some other command.
Sure.
That also derives from I command, and that also provides its own default implementation of execute.
Okay.
And now you have a class or another interface that implements both of those two new ones that you did. Now you have clashing default implementations.
Right. Which one should it use?
Which one should it use?
Yeah.
And our answer is none of them. Our answer is if you find yourself in that situation, the compiler is going to say, "Sorry, I can't pick. You have to implement this. You have to implement this yourself." It can only happen if you provide default implementations in overrides, not in the original declaration of the method.
So because I have the override here in my Azure command, if I had a default implementation here as well, you wouldn't be able to provide a default implementation down here, would you?
You would, but that's then more the one down here is more specific. So it would override that one if both of these were, because this one inherits from this one. This one would essentially win when it's in the mix. It would win over things that it derives from. But it's just when you have two that are sort of at the same level in a diamond shape. That's why they call it the diamond problem. Then yes, this can happen. And we just those are, in practice, those are rare cases, I think. This is actually a feature that it's one of the few features I want to say that Java has had for a while and we haven't. This
it's a good design decision at the time.
Yeah, and this turns out to not be a significant problem for them either, the diamond problem. So we're pretty encouraged by that. It's probably even less of a problem in C# because interfaces don't necessarily force implementing classes to have public members corresponding to the interface members. Right? Okay. In C# you can implement an interface without actually having the interface members in your public interface. So it's a little more hidden away.
Okay, cool. Do you want to answer that one from CheerUp? Will C# allow multiple class inheritance in the future?
I don't think so, because once you have multiple inheritance on classes, things get a lot more messy than the multiple inheritance we have here.
Okay.
So I doubt it, but never say never. But it's not a high priority, it's not the purpose of the default implementations to start facilitating multiple inheritance. It's just that there's a single multiple inheritance scenario issue that we can't avoid popping up here. But it's not what it's for.
Okay. Cool.
It's for facilitating evolvability of interfaces, right? You have an interface, a bunch of people implement it, now you want to add another member. Well, do you break those people? No. What you do is you add the member, but you give a default implementation.
Right.
And then existing people aren't broken because they get the default implementation of it, and new people can choose to write their own.
So from my default implementation here in iAzure command, Hugo's asking, can I call the base from this?
Oh, we've been debating that so much. I think the current design, it's a little while since we looked at it last. I think the current design allows it, but it's a little more messy. If you want to call default implementations from other implementations, it's a little more messy than just base, because you might have more than one base interface. And as we just talked about in the diamond situation,
Oh, wow.
multiple ones. If you have multiple ones that all provide default implementations, you're forced to provide a new one. But what you might want to say is, I want the one from the left branch. But you have to specify that.
You'd have to specify
so
which
we need
base.
New syntax to say which base. And is that then base, open paren, and then a type, or something like that? Yeah.
Oh, that'd be tricky.
Or we could just say, well, sorry, you have to repeat yourself. You don't get to. I mean, that might be where we land, because there's a limit as to how much new syntax we want to introduce for the special case.
But we were showing earlier, you have your design meetings that you publish the notes from out to the GitHub repository. Folks can check in, they can watch the progress of C# 8, and they can also tune in later today. You're at, is it 4:45?
4:45, yeah.
So that's 4:45 Pacific, that's 7:45 Eastern. The future of C# here at Build. That'll be live streamed at build.windows.com and recorded so folks can catch it later. Thanks so much for joining me today. This is
Thanks
great.
for having
Thanks
me.
so
That
much
was fun.
for having me.
Thank you.
For joining
And
us.
thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank
on
you
the
all
stream
the
as well.
viewers out there. Let's put a little bit of applause sound effect out there. I'll archive off this video. It'll be available on YouTube a little bit later today. And I look forward to seeing you guys a little bit later. I'll be at 1 o'clock today. I'll be over at the Live Share Pavilion. They want me to run their Live Share Pavilion, live sharing here on stream.
Ooh.
That's going to be weird. We're going to give it a shot and see what happens.
Nothing can go wrong.
Nothing. Alrighty. Catch you later, everybody. We'll see you next time.